The air was thick with the kind of tension that made hearts pound and palms sweat. Inside the sprawling, luxurious lobby of Everhart Enterprises, the polished marble floors reflected the fluorescent lights with a cold, indifferent gleam. Shiny elevators opened and closed with a mechanical precision, but none of the elegance could hide the storm brewing in the center of the room. And there she stood, Alana. A young black woman, no older than 22, dressed in a simple, faded blouse and a skirt that had seen better days. Her hair was tied neatly back, but her eyes, bright, intelligent, and fiercely determined, betrayed the anxiety that gripped her. In her trembling hands, she clutched a small envelope, her only hope, the key to fixing a mistake she hadn't even made. On the other side of the room, the antagonist, Mr. Dalton, loomed like a predator in tailored perfection. A man whose smug arrogance seemed to seep into the air, whose polished shoes echoed authority, and whose gaze could make even the bravest soul shrink. He had a way of belittling everyone around him, an ability honed to perfection over decades of wealth, power, and entitlement. "You really think you belong here?" Dalton sneered, his voice dripping with scorn, making every word sound like a slap across Alana's face. "Do you even understand what this is? This isn't your world." He gestured dismissively at her tattered clothes. "You don't have the faintest idea." Alana swallowed hard, her throat dry, but she held her ground. I can fix this," she said, her voice quivering but defiant. A cruel, hollow laugh echoed through the lobby. Dalton's colleagues, leaning against the glass walls and office desks, snickered quietly, the kind of laughter that stung sharper than any slap. "Fix this," Dalton barked. "Fix this." "Oh, sweetheart, you can barely fix your own life, let alone anything that matters." Her hands tightened around the envelope. Every eye in the room seemed to burn into her, some with amusement, some with judgment, and a few with sheer indifference. No one stepped forward. No one offered help. It was just her against him, a David standing before a Goliath who wore a smile sharper than a knife. Dalton leaned forward, his face now only inches from hers. Sniffed derision as if her mere presence offended him. "Do you know what happens to people like you here?" he hissed. "They get laughed at, they get humiliated, and then they leave, empty-handed, ashamed, and forgotten." Alana's heart thudded painfully against her ribcage, but she refused to let him see the fear clawing at her chest. She took a deep breath, speaking louder this time, steadier. I can fix this. I can. Please, just give me a chance." Dalton's laugh turned into a sharp, cutting cackle. "A chance?" he jeered. "You want a chance? Do you know how many people I've crushed in my lifetime? Do you know what happens to little girls who think they can waltz in here and demand respect?" He snapped his fingers, and the laughter from his colleagues grew louder, more mocking. Alana felt the heat rise to her face. Her cheeks burned. Every ounce of her body screamed for her to run, but she knew she couldn't. Her mother was sick, lying in a dim, cramped apartment somewhere across the city, waiting for medicine she couldn't afford. Her younger brother's stomach growled with hunger that morning, a sound that haunted her with every step she took. She had no choice. She had to stand here. She had to fight, even when everything in her screamed to give up. Dalton's eyes narrowed, and his voice dipped to a venomous whisper that made Alana shiver. "You think you're some kind of hero, some savior. Let me tell you something. Heroes don't come from your side of the tracks. Heroes don't look like you." The room fell silent, all eyes now glued to the small, fragile figure standing alone in front of power incarnate. Some watched out of curiosity, some out of discomfort, but none moved. None dared to intervene. Alana's breath caught in her throat. It felt as though the air itself had conspired to trap her, to make her collapse under the weight of humiliation and despair. And yet, in that very moment, as Dalton's laughter echoed, something deep inside Alana stirred. Not fear, not doubt, but a flicker of courage, a spark of defiance that refused to be extinguished no matter how powerful the opposition. She looked him straight in the eye. I can fix this," she repeated louder, steadier. Her voice trembled, yes, but it carried a weight that no one could ignore. "I know I can." Dalton froze for just a moment, the sneer faltering as if her words had unexpectedly pierced through the protective armor of his arrogance. Then, almost violently, he regained composure, his lips curling into a sharper, more dangerous smile. "You," he spat, "you think you can fix this?" Before Alana could answer, a small commotion stirred in the crowd near the lobby entrance. Eyes flicked toward a figure, someone standing there quietly observing. The moment was fleeting, but there was something different, something that didn't belong to the ordinary staff or the usual clients. A sense of authority, calm and unshakable, emanated from this person, and even Dalton's smile faltered. But the moment passed. Dalton's laughter returned, crueler than ever. "Go on then," he mocked. Try all you want. It won't change a thing. You're nothing here, nothing at all." Alana's fingers clenched the envelope so tightly her knuckles turned white. She could feel the eyes of the room burning into her back, felt the judgment and mockery like a physical weight. And yet she refused to shrink. She refused to bow. She took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and whispered under her breath, almost as if speaking to herself, "I will fix this." Dalton tilted his head, sensing the challenge in her quiet defiance. His eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned her face. "Oh, you will?" he sneered, stepping closer. "Then let's see it. Show me. Prove to me that someone like you, someone so insignificant, could actually matter in my world." Alana opened her mouth to respond, but the words froze in her throat. The room seemed to contract, the air heavier, the fluorescent lights glaring down like interrogators. And then in the corner of her vision, she noticed the stranger again, the quiet figure who had appeared from nowhere, watching intently, an expression unreadable but calm, commanding even. The anticipation was unbearable. Dalton smirked, the crowd waiting for her failure. And for a split second, Alana's mind raced through every fear, every doubt, every scenario where she might fail. And then she remembered why she was here. Not for pride, not for revenge, not for attention. She was here for her mother, for her brother, for the small spark of hope that refused to die inside her heart. She stepped forward, her voice gaining strength with every word. "I said I can fix this." Dalton laughed again, louder, crueler, certain of victory. "Then do it. Show me. Make me believe that you—" Before he could finish, Alana's gaze flicked toward the stranger. Something unspoken passed between them, a silent acknowledgement, a bond, an understanding. And in that instant, the world seemed to shift. Dalton's confident sneer wavered for the first time. The crowd held its breath. The air felt electric. And then— But little did the cruel manager know, his life was about to be turned upside down, because a stranger standing in the crowd knew a secret about this girl that would shock everyone. Alana's determination, her defiance, and her courage were about to set off a chain of events no one in that polished lobby could have ever imagined. The tension hung thickly as the camera, or the viewer, if this were a video, would zoom slowly on Alana's face, highlighting the mixture of fear, hope, and unbreakable resolve. Then the screen would fade into the soft morning light outside her modest apartment. Let's go back to how this story truly began this morning. The morning sun spilled its golden light over the cramped apartment building, turning the peeling paint of the walls into muted shades of orange and brown. The air smelled faintly of old laundry, dust, and the lingering aroma of cheap instant coffee, a scent that had become strangely comforting over the years. Inside apartment 3B, Alana stirred awake before the sun had fully risen, her body heavy from exhaustion but her mind alert, already running through the day's impossible demands. Her small bedroom was a mosaic of careful organization amidst poverty. A single bed with a thin blanket tucked neatly, a cracked wooden dresser, and a small desk littered with well-used notebooks and pens. On the wall hung a faded photograph of her mother, smiling in better days, and next to it, a tiny calendar marked with the days she had saved money for medicine and groceries. Every detail spoke of someone trying desperately to hold life together, someone who refused to let hardship define them. That someone was Alana. She glanced across the room at her mother, lying on the narrow couch in the living room, her skin pale and her breathing shallow. Mrs. Thompson had been sick for weeks now, an illness that didn't have a name yet, a series of misdiagnoses and unaffordable treatments that kept her confined to that couch. Alana's heart clenched at the sight. She had watched her mother's strength fade, witnessed the warmth of her laughter replaced by the quiet sighs of pain. "Mom," Alana whispered, kneeling beside her. She gently brushed a strand of hair from her mother's forehead. "I'll make it today, I promise." Her mother opened tired eyes and offered a weak smile. "Alana, don't push yourself too hard. You've done enough." "I can't stop," Alana said softly but firmly. "I'll figure it out. I always do." From the corner of the living room came the small, insistent cry of her younger brother, Jamal. At 5 years old, he was too young to understand the burden on Alana's shoulders, yet he felt it in his own way, the worry in her eyes, the tension in her voice, the emptiness in the kitchen cupboards. Alana hurried over to him, lifting him gently into her arms. "Don't cry, little man," she murmured, rocking him slightly. "I'll take care of us, I promise." But promises were a fragile thing in their apartment. Alana opened the empty cupboards and sighed. There wasn't a single piece of bread, not a drop of milk, not even a few cookies to offer as a temporary comfort. Her stomach twisted, not from hunger, but from the gnawing anxiety of knowing she had no way to feed her brother today. This wasn't the first time she had faced such desperation. Alana had grown up learning the weight of responsibility far earlier than most children. Her father had left when she was just 7, and her mother's illness had begun a few years after that. From that point on, Alana had been both sister and mother, balancing school, odd jobs, and the care of her family. She had learned how to stretch every dollar, how to make a meager meal into something filling, and how to keep hope alive even when the world seemed determined to snuff it out. Today, however, was different. The stakes were higher. Her mother's cough had worsened overnight, and the medicine that could ease it, a small, relatively inexpensive prescription, was something Alana simply didn't have the money to buy. Bills had piled up. Debts from unpaid rent and utilities hung like dark clouds over their tiny apartment, and any assistance she had once hoped to receive seemed permanently out of reach. Alana dressed quickly, choosing her most presentable clothes from the handful she owned, the same skirt and blouse she would later wear into the lobby of Everhart Enterprises. She looked at herself in the cracked mirror, brushing her hair back, her reflection showing both fatigue and fierce determination. "I can fix this," she whispered to her reflection. It was a mantra she had repeated countless times during sleepless nights, and today she would need it more than ever. Before leaving, she packed a small bag with the essentials. The envelope containing her mother's prescription request, a few dollars she had scraped together, and the tiny notebook where she kept track of every expense, every opportunity, every potential lifeline. That envelope, so small and insignificant to most, was the hope of her family's survival. Alana's journey from her apartment to the towering skyscraper of Everhart Enterprises was a study in contrasts. The streets of her neighborhood were crowded with broken sidewalks, flickering streetlights, and the scent of roasting peanuts and gasoline. Vendors called out, children played in alleys, and neighbors exchanged hurried greetings, their faces lined with fatigue. Alana navigated the streets with purpose, nodding to familiar faces but not stopping. She didn't have the luxury of time for conversation or leisure. Every second counted. As she walked, she passed rows of luxury cars glinting in the morning sun outside office buildings, their owners oblivious to the struggles of the world they had left behind. Every polished window and sparkling facade seemed to mock her, a reminder of the gulf between her reality and the world she was about to enter. She paused for a moment to look at one of the buildings, its mirrored glass reflecting her tired but determined face. "I belong here," she whispered, more to convince herself than anyone else. "I can fix this." Her mind wandered briefly to what she would do if she failed, if she returned without the medicine, without food, without hope. The thought made her stomach turn, but she refused to linger there. There was no time for despair, only action, only courage, only faith in herself. Inside the lobby, she could feel her pulse quicken. The sheer scale of the place, the cold efficiency of the staff, and the pristine, almost sterile environment made her feel out of place. A small figure stepping into a world of wealth and influence she had never known. Every step toward the front desk felt heavier than the last, her bag swinging lightly at her side, her heart hammering with anticipation and fear. She was about to step into a situation she could never have fully anticipated, the moment when all the hopes and fears of the morning would collide. But before she could reach the counter, she paused. She took a deep breath, steadying herself, feeling the weight of her family's survival pressing on her shoulders. "I can fix this," she murmured one last time, the words now more of a declaration than a plea. Little did she know this morning, the one filled with struggle, urgency, and heartache, was about to become a turning point. One small act of courage, one plea for help, would set off a chain of events that no one, not even Dalton, could have imagined. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and she stepped inside, feeling a mixture of dread and determination. Every floor passed slowly, the polished metal walls reflecting her anxious reflection back at her. She could hear the faint hum of the building's air conditioning, the distant chatter of employees, and the subtle tick of the elevator's mechanical heartbeat. And as the doors opened to the lobby, revealing the cold, glaring fluorescent lights, the polished floors, and the indifferent crowd, Alana felt the culmination of all her struggles, all her sacrifices, all her unspoken prayers coalesce into a single moment. She was here. She was ready. But she didn't yet know that this simple step, walking into a lobby with nothing but courage and hope, would challenge the arrogance of a man who thought he ruled the world and spark the beginning of a story that would change her life forever. The lobby of Everhart Enterprises was a world apart from anything Alana had ever known. The high ceilings stretched upward as though trying to touch the sky, crystal chandeliers refracted light like tiny prisms of wealth, and the marble floors gleamed under the pristine fluorescent lighting. Every surface spoke of power, of influence, of a life she could only dream of. And yet none of it impressed her. None of it mattered. She had a mission. She had a purpose. She had a family waiting on her courage. Alana stepped cautiously toward the front desk, her hand tightening around the envelope as though it were a lifeline. Her pulse raced. Every polished reflection of herself in the marble walls made her feel smaller, more fragile, but she forced herself to walk taller, to lift her chin, to step into this world as if she belonged. Her eyes scanned the room, trying to find the person who could help her. Behind the glossy counter stood Mr. Dalton, the very definition of arrogance wrapped in a tailored suit. His posture was impeccable, his smile sharp and predatory. He had been expecting someone like her, a person who thought she could step into his world and demand attention. "Next," Dalton barked, gesturing impatiently with a perfectly manicured hand. His voice carried across the lobby, authoritative, cutting, and cold. Alana took a step forward, her voice barely audible as she said, "Excuse me, I need help." "I have this." She lifted the envelope slightly, showing its contents without revealing everything. Dalton's eyes narrowed. "Oh, you again, and what is it you think you're doing here, coming into my office waving a piece of paper around like it's a magic wand?" Alana swallowed hard but didn't retreat. I just need a chance, please, it's urgent." A snicker came from a group of employees leaning casually by the glass wall, whispering among themselves. Alana felt their judgment like a knife twisting in her chest. No one looked up in sympathy. No one offered even the slightest encouragement. She was utterly alone. Dalton leaned forward, resting one elbow on the counter, his face dangerously close to hers. "Urgent, you say? Urgent for you, maybe. But do you know how the real world works? Do you know what happens to people like you when they walk into a place they don't belong?" Alana's jaw tightened, her knuckles turning white as she gripped the envelope. "I know I don't have much," she admitted, her voice firm despite the fear lacing it, "but I do have the right to ask for help." Dalton laughed, a slow, cruel, hollow laugh that echoed in the lobby. "Help, you're asking for help, that's rich." He waved a dismissive hand at her clothing, her worn shoes, the bag slung over her shoulder. "Do you know what people like you get when they step into my office? They get laughed at, mocked, humiliated, that's what they get." Laughter from his colleagues grew, some outright mocking, some silent but scornful. Alana's stomach knotted. She could feel the weight of every stare, the crushing sense of invisibility that poverty often carried. And yet somewhere deep inside, a spark of defiance refused to die. She straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and met Dalton's gaze. "I don't care what you think of me," she said, her voice steadier now, stronger. "I need help. My mother, she's very sick. My brother, he hasn't eaten today. I don't have anyone else to turn to. Please, just give me a chance." Dalton's eyes glinted with amusement, as if her words were nothing more than a joke. "A chance," he repeated mockingly. "Do you even understand what that word means in my world? You're nothing, a nobody, and you dare stand here demanding help." Alana's chest burned. She could feel tears threatening to spill, but she blinked them back, refusing to let him see even a fraction of her despair. She had endured far too much for that. She took a deep breath, her mind focusing not on her fear but on the faces of her mother and brother waiting at home. "I may be nothing to you," she said softly but firmly, "but I am everything to them, and that is enough." Dalton's smile faltered for a brief second, replaced by a flicker of irritation. Then, with a sharp gesture, he slammed his hand on the counter. "You think courage makes up for ignorance. You think heart makes up for lack of money, lack of status, lack of everything that matters." The crowd had grown silent now, watching the exchange unfold. But still no one intervened. No one defended her. She was alone in the storm of ridicule, standing tall against a man who thrived on the suffering of others. The reality of it struck her deeply. Sometimes people were too selfish, too afraid, or too indifferent to help. And yet, even in the suffocating loneliness of that moment, she refused to yield. "I can fix this," she said again, almost a whisper, but the weight of it carried through the lobby. "I will fix this. I won't fail my family." Dalton's laughter cut through the air once more, harsher this time. "Fix this," he spat. You're delusional. You can't fix anything. You can't even fix yourself. Look at you, pathetic, desperate, and completely out of your depth." Alana felt her heart hammering in her chest, her breaths coming shallow and fast. Every insult, every cruel word, every mocking glance from the bystanders pressed down on her like a physical weight. And yet the envelope in her hand seemed to hum with importance, a tangible symbol of her determination, her love, her hope. Her voice, though shaking, rose above the crowd. "I said, I can fix this." Dalton leaned even closer, the arrogance radiating from him like heat from a furnace. You're nothing. You think some courage, some desperate plea changes anything in the real world. You're going to leave here humiliated and everyone will laugh at you. That's your destiny." Alana's mind raced. How could she possibly convince him? How could she make him understand that her fight wasn't for pride or attention or recognition, but for survival, for love, for family? She opened her mouth to answer, to plead, to argue, but the room seemed to close in around her. Every polished surface reflected her vulnerability, every indifferent face reminded her how alone she truly was. And just as despair began to creep in, a subtle shift occurred. From the corner of the lobby, a figure emerged. Not with haste, not with drama, but with calm, deliberate authority. A tall, well-dressed man with a presence that seemed to command respect simply by existing. His eyes, compassionate and intelligent, settled on Alana, and for the first time in the lobby, someone didn't look at her with judgment. Someone saw her. Dalton, however, noticed him too. His arrogance didn't falter at first. He sneered, ready to assert dominance over anyone who dared challenge him. "Ah, another spectator," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Care to watch a little girl try and fail?" The stranger's gaze didn't waver. Took a slow step forward, his voice calm even, but cutting through the room like a knife. "I suggest you show some respect," he said softly, almost casually. But the words carried weight that made Dalton hesitate. Alana felt a flicker of hope ignite within her chest. She wasn't entirely alone. Someone powerful, someone with influence, had noticed her, and for reasons she could not yet understand, had stepped forward. The tide of humiliation, though not yet fully turned, had begun to shift. Dalton laughed nervously, masking the sudden uncertainty with bravado. "Respect? From you?" He waved dismissively at the stranger. "Do you even know who I am?" The stranger didn't answer immediately. Instead, his eyes lingered on Alana, offering a silent reassurance. And for the first time that morning, she allowed herself to draw strength from the presence beside her. The stage was set. The confrontation had reached its peak. Dalton believed he held all the power, that Alana was broken, that the world belonged to the arrogant and indifferent. But the quiet, commanding presence of the stranger signaled that change was coming, a change that Dalton could neither anticipate nor control. The crowd waited, tense, breaths held for what would happen next. And that's when the real twist, the arrival of the savior, was about to unfold. The tension in the lobby had become almost unbearable. Alana's chest heaved with a mixture of fear and defiance, her palms sweaty but steady as she gripped the envelope that carried her family's fragile hope. Dalton's smirk had grown sharper, crueler, as if he could taste the victory he anticipated. The murmurs of the employees and onlookers were like whispers of judgment, and the polished floor beneath her feet felt suddenly treacherous, ready to swallow her whole. And then, from the corner of her vision, Alana noticed movement. Not frantic, not hurried, but deliberate, dignified. Someone stepping forward with a quiet authority that made the room seem to pause. The stranger who had been observing her, standing silently among the lobby's crowd, now entered the space between her and Dalton. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray suit, with silver threads subtly woven into the fabric that hinted at wealth and refinement without ostentation. His presence was calm, commanding, yet infused with a warmth that immediately contrasted Dalton's sharp arrogance. He stopped a few steps from Alana, his gaze gentle but unwavering. There was no rush, no drama, only the unmistakable aura of someone who had seen power in its many forms, and yet chose to wield it with kindness. Dalton's smirk faltered for the first time. He leaned slightly toward the stranger, trying to mask the flicker of unease in his sharp eyes. "And who are you supposed to be?" asked, voice dripping with scorn. "A bodyguard, a do-gooder, or maybe the conscience of this lobby?" The stranger's lips curved into a subtle, almost imperceptible smile. His voice was calm, measured, and yet each word resonated with authority. "I am someone who does not tolerate cruelty," he said simply, "and I do not allow innocence to be humiliated in my presence." Dalton laughed nervously, a little too quickly, the sound betraying his attempt to regain control. "Oh, so you're the hero now." He jeered. "Tell me, what can you do? Punish me? Fire me? Do you even have the authority to—" The stranger's eyes narrowed slightly, his calm demeanor turning sharper, almost surgical in precision. "I suggest you choose your next words very carefully," he said, his tone ice-cold yet composed. Because if you continue down this path, the consequences will be immediate. Alana felt a flicker of hope stir in her chest. For the first time that morning, she felt seen, not as a desperate girl pleading for help, but as a human being worthy of respect. The stranger's presence seemed to draw a protective circle around her, making Dalton's usual arrogance feel suddenly small, almost fragile. Dalton, unwilling to show weakness, straightened and laughed again, though it was forced this time. "And what? You're going to lecture me? You're going to—" The stranger raised one hand gently, and the room seemed to hold its breath. "No lectures," he said, "just the truth." His gaze shifted to Alana, meeting hers with an intensity that made her heart skip. "And the truth is she is not just anyone." Dalton blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" he spat, a hint of irritation creeping in. "She's a—" The stranger's voice dropped, commanding and undeniable. "This girl is my daughter, my adopted daughter, and you just humiliated a member of my family." The words hung in the air like a hammer striking glass. The lobby fell silent. Every face froze, the polite murmur of employees vanishing into stunned disbelief. Dalton's jaw dropped, his confident posture crumbling as if the floor itself had shifted beneath him. Alana's eyes widened. Daughter? Adopted? The words struck her like lightning. She hadn't known this man, this stranger, held such a connection, yet somehow in his calm authority she felt the truth of it. Her pulse raced, hope and astonishment intertwining into a force that steadied her trembling hands. Dalton staggered slightly backward, his arrogance completely dismantled. "Why, you what?" he stammered. "You this, that girl?" His voice cracked under the weight of shock and fear. "You, your daughter." The stranger nodded, a faint, dignified smile touching his lips. "Yes, and because of that, your actions are not just cruel, they are unforgivable. In this building, under my watch, you will answer for every insult, every humiliation you've inflicted." Alana felt a mixture of relief and awe. The same man who had towered over her moments ago, whose scorn had seemed unshakable, now seemed powerless. Dalton, who had believed himself untouchable, now faced the full weight of authority and justice. The employees, who had been complicit in their silence, now watched in stunned silence. Some exchanged glances of disbelief, while others whispered nervously among themselves. The power dynamic had shifted completely. The cruel, arrogant manager who had thought himself untouchable now trembled before a force he had never anticipated. Alana's voice, still steady, carried through the lobby. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cause trouble. I just needed help." The stranger stepped closer to her, his expression softening. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You caused no trouble," he said quietly, warmly. "You acted with courage, with love, and with integrity. That is all that matters." Dalton's face had turned pale. He stammered, trying to find footing, but the words caught in his throat. I didn't know. You knew exactly what you were doing," the stranger replied, his voice calm but cutting. "And that is why you will face the consequences." He paused, letting the weight of his authority settle over Dalton like a physical force. "Effective immediately, you are suspended from your position. HR has been notified. Legal proceedings will begin shortly. And let this be a lesson. Cruelty has no place here, not toward her, not toward anyone." Dalton's protests fell flat. His usual arrogance had crumbled entirely. The crowd of employees whispered among themselves, some nodding subtly in agreement, others staring wide-eyed at the unexpected turn of events. Alana's knees almost buckled, relief and disbelief mingling inside her. She looked up at the stranger, her savior, her father, the man whose existence she had only recently come to know, and for the first time in what felt like years, she felt safe, truly safe. The stranger knelt slightly, meeting her eyes. "Alana," he said gently, "I have been looking for you, not just today, but for a long time. I know you have faced hardship, that you have carried burdens no child should bear, and I want to help. I will make sure your mother has the care she needs, that your brother is fed, that you are given opportunities you deserve." Tears welled in Alana's eyes. I don't know what to say. I never imagined." "You don't have to say anything," he interrupted softly. "Just trust me. Trust that you are worthy of love, respect, and security. That is why I am here." Dalton, humiliated and powerless, muttered something incoherent, but no one paid him any attention. The power had shifted irrevocably. The cruel manager who had laughed at her despair was now exposed, stripped of authority and rendered inconsequential. Alana took a deep breath, the tension that had gripped her for hours slowly ebbing away. For the first time that day, she allowed herself to feel hope, not the desperate, fragile hope that had propelled her to the lobby, but the solid, unshakable hope that comes from knowing someone powerful, compassionate, and just was on her side. Her savior, her father, stood tall once more, and with a gentle squeeze of her shoulder, whispered, "You are stronger than you realize, and now together we will make sure no one ever undermines your worth again." Alana's lips trembled, a mixture of sobs and laughter threatening to break free. She had faced humiliation, fear, and hopelessness, but now, in a single, astonishing moment, everything had changed. The power of love, courage, and unexpected intervention had turned despair into triumph, and the story she had lived through that morning was only just beginning. In that moment, in the center of a luxurious lobby that had once been a prison of shame and fear, Alana stood tall, not just as a girl who had pleaded for help, but as someone whose worth, courage, and resilience had been recognized, protected, and finally rewarded. The twist, the revelation of her father's identity, was not just a shock for Dalton. It was the turning point of her life, the moment when the impossible became possible, when despair transformed into hope, and when a single act of courage intersected with a single act of kindness to rewrite her destiny. The atmosphere in the lobby had shifted entirely. Where moments ago there had been tension, fear, and humiliation, now there was quiet authority, justice, and the quiet hum of relief. Dalton stood frozen, the cruel sneer wiped from his face, replaced by a pale, trembling mask of disbelief. He had believed himself untouchable, powerful, dominant, untouchable. But in that moment he realized the world was larger, more just, and far more unpredictable than he had ever imagined. The savior, Alana's adopted father, took a calm, measured step forward. "Mr. Dalton," he began, his voice steady and unyielding, "your behavior today has violated the ethical standards of this organization. You have publicly humiliated an innocent person, exercised prejudice, and threatened someone in your charge. As of this moment, you are suspended indefinitely. Human Resources has been notified, and the legal department is reviewing this matter for further action." Dalton opened his mouth, desperate to argue, but no words came out. The employees around him watched in stunned silence, their earlier amusement now replaced with awe and, in some cases, a touch of fear. A man who had seemed invincible, whose ridicule had dominated the lobby, was now reduced to a powerless figure. The savior's gaze returned to Alana. "And you," he said gently, "have done nothing wrong. You have acted with courage, integrity, and determination. Those qualities will take you far, far beyond this lobby." Alana felt tears well in her eyes. Relief, disbelief, and gratitude coursed through her. I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. "You don't need to," he said, smiling warmly. "All that matters is that you and your family are safe, supported, and valued. That is enough." Dalton muttered something incoherent under his breath, and finally, defeated, he turned and left the lobby, his polished shoes echoing against the marble floor like a fading shadow of his arrogance. The employees whispered among themselves, some shaking their heads, some marveling at the sudden reversal. For the first time, they realized that cruelty and entitlement would never protect them from accountability, not when justice was swift and uncompromising. Alana's father knelt slightly, meeting her eyes at her level. "Alana," he said softly, "I know you have carried burdens no child should bear. You have struggled, sacrificed, and endured hardships that could have broken a lesser person. But you didn't break, you persevered, and for that I am proud of you." Alana swallowed hard, her voice trembling. I just wanted to help my mother and my brother. I didn't ask for anything else. You just acted with love," he interrupted gently. "And love is far more powerful than cruelty, arrogance, or money. That is why you will never be alone again." The words felt like a warm embrace around her heart. For years, she had carried the weight of responsibility, the anxiety of her mother's illness, the gnawing fear of failing her family. And now, in this moment, all of that burden felt lighter, because she had someone on her side who was powerful, compassionate, and unwavering in his support. Her father stood, extending a hand. "Come with me, Alana. Let's make sure your family has everything they need. No more fear, no more hunger, no more sleepless nights wondering if someone will care. That ends today." Alana nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks, and took his hand. She felt a surge of hope she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Together, they walked toward the elevator, leaving the polished marble lobby behind, and stepping into a future that promised care, protection, and opportunity. The first stop was the small apartment she had left that morning, a place that had held both love and struggle in equal measure. Alana's father insisted on coming with her, and when they arrived, he was struck by the modest conditions. Peeling paint, the faint smell of unwashed laundry, and the small but carefully maintained corners that Alana had managed to organize with her limited resources. Her mother, frail and pale, looked up as the door opened. Alana, is that you? She whispered, weak but hopeful. Alana ran to her, embracing her tightly. Mom, everything is going to be okay now, I promise. Her father stepped forward, introducing himself gently. Mrs. Thompson, I am Alana's father. I am here to make sure you and your family have everything you need. No more suffering, no more fear. Mrs. Thompson's eyes widened, tears spilling down her cheeks. Everything, she asked, voice trembling. But how? You don't need to worry about how, he said with a warm smile. All that matters is that you will be safe, cared for, and supported from now on. Alana's younger brother, Jamal, peeked out from behind the couch, his eyes wide with curiosity. Is he really going to help us? He asked softly. Yes, Alana whispered, ruffling his hair. He's going to help us, Jamal. Everything's going to be different now. Her father knelt to meet Jamal's gaze. I promise, little one, you'll never go hungry, you'll never be afraid, and you'll always have someone looking out for you. Over the next few hours, the transformation began. Her father arranged for immediate medical care for Mrs. Thompson, ensuring she had access to the medicine she desperately needed. Groceries were delivered to the apartment, stocked with nutritious food for the whole family. Bills that had accumulated were paid off, lifting the weight of anxiety that had pressed down on Alana's shoulders for years. Sitting down with Alana later that evening, her father opened a notebook. We need a plan, he said softly but firmly. Shown immense courage, but courage alone isn't enough to secure a future. Education, opportunity, stability, these are just as important. Alana looked at him, curiosity and hope mingling in her gaze. Education? She asked. Yes, he replied, smiling. You're bright, capable, and determined. I want to make sure you have every opportunity to succeed. You'll go to school, receive the best education available, and you'll have the chance to pursue whatever dreams you have, without fear, without limitation. Tears streamed down Alana's face. I don't even know what to say. I've dreamed of this, but I never thought. You don't have to say anything, he interrupted gently. Just accept it. Accept the support, accept the love, and know that from this day forward, your family's struggles will not define you. You define yourself, Alana, and I am here to make sure nothing and no one takes that away from you. For the first time in years, Alana felt a weight lift from her shoulders, a weight she had carried alone since childhood. The fear, the anxiety, the constant pressure of survival, it all began to fade, replaced with something she had rarely allowed herself to feel: security, hope, and belonging. Her mother, resting on the couch with medicine in hand, smiled weakly. Alana, she said softly, I don't know how to thank him or you. You've saved us. Alana shook her head, tears of relief and joy streaming down her face. No, Mom, we saved each other, and I finally have someone to help carry the weight. Her father nodded, placing a gentle hand on both of their shoulders. Together, we will make sure your lives are never defined by fear or poverty again. Justice has been served, and now redemption begins, not just for your family, but for everyone who witnessed that cruelty today. Let it be a lesson. Love, courage, and integrity always prevail. That night, as the family settled into their modest apartment with a newfound sense of security, Alana allowed herself to dream. Not the desperate, small dreams of survival, but the wide, expansive dreams of possibility, education, travel, achievement, and a life free from fear. For the first time, she could imagine a future where her family thrived, where love and opportunity were abundant, and where her courage had been recognized, rewarded, and amplified by the intervention of someone who truly cared. In that moment, Alana understood a profound truth. One act of courage, one moment of defiance, one plea for help combined with compassion and justice could change the course of a life entirely. The world, cruel and indifferent as it often seemed, still had room for kindness, integrity, and redemption, and she had just been given a chance to experience it firsthand. Years had passed since that fateful morning in the lobby of Everhart Enterprises. The memory of Dalton's sneer, the laughter of the indifferent bystanders, and the heavy weight of desperation that had pressed down on her shoulders seemed almost unreal now, like a dream she had once lived and survived. Alana stood at the entrance of a modern, sunlit apartment, her hand resting lightly on the doorframe. The soft hum of the city below reminded her of how far she had come, from the cramped, peeling walls of apartment 3B to a space filled with light, warmth, and hope. She wore a tailored blazer over a crisp blouse, her hair styled elegantly, and her eyes sparkled with confidence. Every detail of her appearance whispered the story of someone who had endured, survived, and triumphed. Inside, the apartment was alive with the sounds of laughter and chatter. Jamal, now 12, raced around the living room, his small legs carrying the boundless energy of a child who had never known hunger or fear. Mrs. Thompson, healthier than she had been in years, sat on the couch, reading a book with a serene smile, her illness a distant memory thanks to the care Alana's father had ensured. Alana's father, still impeccably dressed but now in a more relaxed manner, looked up from the kitchen where he was preparing breakfast. He caught her gaze and smiled, a mixture of pride and love evident in his eyes. "Morning, Alana," he said warmly. "Sleep well?" "I did," she replied, her smile radiant. "It's strange, isn't it, how different everything feels now?" He nodded, pouring a cup of coffee for himself. "Different indeed. But that's the result of courage, determination, and a little bit of luck, or perhaps fate. You chose to act, to stand tall even when the world tried to break you. That choice made all the difference." Alana's gaze softened as she walked over to him. "I couldn't have done it alone," she admitted. "I've learned that courage can take you far, but love and support, they make all the impossible things possible." He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Exactly. And now, Alana, you have every opportunity to shape your own destiny. Education, career, and the life you've dreamed of, it's all within your reach." Her mind wandered briefly to that day, the humiliation, the fear, the moments when she had thought of turning back. It all seemed like a distant memory, yet it had shaped her in ways she could never forget. The struggles of her past had given her strength, resilience, and a profound appreciation for every opportunity that now came her way. Jamal ran past her, giggling as he chased a small toy robot across the polished wooden floor. "Alana, look, I programmed it to dance," he shouted, his voice brimming with excitement. Alana laughed, ruffling his hair. "That's amazing, Jamal. You're going to be a genius one day." Her mother looked up from her book, her smile gentle and proud. "Your brother and I are so lucky to have you, Alana. You've given us a life we could never have imagined." Alana knelt beside her mother, taking her hand. "No, Mom. We are lucky to have each other. I couldn't have done any of this without you, without our family." The scene was peaceful, filled with love, warmth, and laughter, a stark contrast to the fear, desperation, and humiliation that had defined their lives not so long ago. And yet, the story of Alana's courage and the life-changing intervention of her father was one that she would carry with her forever, a reminder of the power of resilience and kindness. Later that day, Alana attended the grand opening of the scholarship program her father had arranged for her. The auditorium was filled with students, parents, and faculty, all buzzing with excitement. Alana, now a confident young woman in her mid-20s, stepped onto the stage to speak. Her voice, clear and steady, resonated through the hall. "When I was younger," she began, "I faced struggles that often felt impossible. There were moments when I thought I couldn't go on, when fear and hopelessness threatened to stop me in my tracks. But I learned something powerful. Courage, integrity, and determination can change everything, even when the world seems stacked against you." She paused, scanning the audience, her eyes lingering on the faces of those who had supported her journey. "I also learned that sometimes, all it takes is one person to believe in you, to see your worth when no one else does. For me, that person was my father. But it could have been anyone, a teacher, a stranger, a friend, who chose to act with compassion and kindness." The audience listened in rapt silence, captivated by her story. Alana continued, her words flowing with sincerity and passion. "I am here today because I chose to stand tall and because someone chose to protect and support me. Every challenge I faced taught me resilience, every moment of fear taught me strength, and every act of kindness I received taught me hope. And now I have the chance to pay that forward, to help others, to create opportunities, and to ensure that no one ever feels powerless or alone." The applause that followed was thunderous. Alana felt a deep sense of fulfillment, not from recognition, but from knowing that her journey, from the cramped apartment, from the humiliating lobby, from the moments of desperation, had led to a life where she could truly make a difference. Back at home that evening, the family gathered for dinner, a feast that had once been unimaginable. The table was filled with fresh vegetables, homemade bread, and dishes that reflected both care and abundance. Jamal chattered excitedly about his day at school, his inventions, and his dreams. Mrs. Thompson laughed freely, a sound that had once been rare in their apartment, while Alana's father shared stories of his work, subtly weaving in lessons about resilience, kindness, and integrity. Alana looked around the table, a profound sense of gratitude filling her heart. "I never imagined we could have all of this," she said softly, her voice filled with awe. "I never imagined we could live without fear, without hunger, without constant worry." Her father reached across the table, taking her hand. You earned this, Alana. Your courage, determination, and love for your family created the life you now live. But remember this, a life of privilege or opportunity is only meaningful when it is used to make a difference, to lift others up, and to spread kindness. That is your responsibility and your power. Alana nodded, understanding the depth of his words. I promise I will, Dad. I'll make sure our story helps others, that it inspires them to keep going, to stand tall, and to act with courage and integrity no matter what. The camera, or the perspective of the viewer, would pull back slowly, showing the family laughing, sharing, and living fully. The past, with all its struggles, seemed distant now, yet it had shaped them, bonded them, and strengthened them in ways that comfort, wealth, or privilege alone could never have. And in that moment, the moral of the story became clear. Life is not defined by wealth, status, or external circumstances, but by courage, love, and the willingness to act when it matters most. Alana's journey had begun with desperation, had been tested by cruelty, and had been transformed by compassion. From fear and despair, she had found hope and purpose. A single act of courage and kindness can transform a life. True wealth is measured not by money or power, but by love, integrity, and the willingness to uplift others. In the face of adversity, standing tall, acting with compassion, and believing in yourself can change not just your world, but the world of everyone around you. The screen would fade to a final shot, Alana and her family standing together on the balcony of their apartment, looking out over the city. The sun sets in hues of gold and pink, a symbol of hope, new beginnings, and the infinite possibilities that come from courage, resilience, and love. The story, which began with humiliation, fear, and despair, ended in triumph, security, and the promise of a brighter future, a testament to the transformative power of standing up, taking action, and trusting in kindness.